you want me to try to hold it back? Tell me, baby, do you like it like that when I rock with you? Ooh, girl, let me take you to Toco Loco when the sun go low. We could go and go, girl, go. I'm talking hours and non-stop jam. You is a gem, let me take your hand, just come and go, girl. Say, girl, why you do me that? Make big man get a heart attack. Girl, the way you look back when you rock back, I feel away when you whine so pretty wine. Flash me a pretty smile. What's on your pretty mind? Tell me, baby, say can you break me out of my bubble? I see in trouble, baby, bubble, cause some trouble. Break me out of my bubble. I see in trouble, baby, bubble. I'm in trouble. You make me reach for the ceiling. Ooh, girl, yeah. Listen to double M when I'm singing to you, girl. Yo, I am feeling, just feeling, I'm feeling. See what I'm seeing. Oh, baby, yeah. Do you see what I'm seeing? I am feeling. I know you feel it too. Girl, I know it's true, yeah. Do you want me to try to hold it back? Tell me, baby, do you like it like that when I rock with you? Ooh, girl, let me take you to Toco Loco when the sun go low. We could go and go, girl, go. I'm talking hours and non-stop jam. You is a gem, let me take your hand, just come and go,
The girl of me up and she night and day. Girl of me up when she wind on day. Girl, how you rock on the line right there. Now give it up 'cause she nice right there. And when she ting down there, I swing down there. Girl of me up and she night and day. Now let this go. Come jam up on me, girl, bring that body. Spread your sweet and me darling. 'Cause what you do, I'm me balling. Whoa, what a feeling. Say baby, I come to wine. Chase some of that, yeah, have a good time. It's all I want, yeah. So come give me all of that, yeah. I say best believe. Oh yeah. When I find it, girl, I'm not moving. How you grooving it? Stay with me. Oh yeah. So girl, I'm hoping that I'm not too late. Have me losing it. And when she jam down there, then I jam down there. And when she ting down there, then I swing down there. Now let this go. The way she jam down there, then I jam down there. And then she swing down there, so I swing down there. Now let this go. Oh. The girl of me up and she night and day. Girl of me up when she wind down there. Girl, how you rock on the line right there. Now give it up 'cause she nice right there. And when she ting down there, I swing down there. Girl of me up and she night and day. Now let this go.
I got enough feeling down in my belly. Brace up yourself because I have so much things to say. Baby, I can text and talk to you all day. It doesn't even matter if you're 1,000 miles away.
Say you're full of my heart with me, I just have to say what I think. I honestly feel like I'm dreaming. Oh my darling, what a feeling. I shouldn't say too much, I'm confusing. But you just have to know you're doing. I'm feeling so good, I must share it. So for those who in love and they feel it,
Let me hear you say yeah. Put your hands in the air. All who love to share. We jumping like we don't care. 'Cause we full of vibe, yeah. Put your hands in the air. All who love to share. We jumping like we don't care. 'Cause we full of vibe, yeah. We full of vibe, yeah. but you just have to know you do it. A feeling so full, I must share it. So for those who are love and you feel it, let me hear you say yeah, yeah. Put your hands in the air, yeah. All I want love to share, yeah. We jumping like we don't die, yeah. Cause we full of vibe, yeah. Put your hands in the air, yeah. All I want love to share, yeah. We jumping like we don't die, yeah. Cause we full of vibe, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. We full of vibe, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Cause we full of vibe, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. We full of vibe, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Dum 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 dum. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, she had the thing I love. Where she from, I don't know. Rock she waist and go low. Pick up the place like a dojo. So what you say, what you say, what you say? Pretty girl, when you come my way. What you do, what you do, what you do? I must get through. Girl, roll up now, you show me that wine. Turn around, girl, don't be shy. Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, so girl, I love how the way you blow my mind. Hold me tight and bring down wine. Hello, 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 hello. Lord, hey. Are you ready? Are you ready for it? Are you ready? Are you ready for it? You want give me that? No hold back. Wind it up, ride it. Front to the back, no long chat. Just come to me. I'll give you that sweet type of love. Sweet type of love. Come give me that sweet type of love. Real type of love. Hold me, darling. Cause whole night we jamming.
12 o'clock on the dot. Answer your phone when I call you up. System lock, you know what's up. I wanna take you for a ride, y'all. Them shoes in your foot, y'all, take it off. Up on your back, that coming off. Hold on tight, now we taking off. Now baby, don't act shy with me. Don't act like you new to this. I know that you used to this. Take your time and go through with this. Show me what you can do with this. My girl, just hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Give me some, give me some, give me some of that. Hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Give me some of that, give me some of that. Hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Give me some, give me some, give me some of that. Hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Baby girl, take that, take that, take that, take that. See tonight ain't no holding back. Baby girl, that's a matter of fact. Oh, hey, we in the zone, we all alone. I feel it's best you turn off your phone. Feel at home, but truth be told, it's going to get messy. Cause me socks and shoes already off. T-shirt, the dance that ripping off. Hold on tight, now we taking off. Baby, don't play that with me. Don't act like you new to this. I know that you used to this. Take your time and go through with this. Show me what you can do with this. My girl, just hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Give me some, give me some, give me some of that. Hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Give me some of that, give me some of that. Hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Give me some, give me some, give me some of that. Hold on to your belly, I go hold on to your back. Baby girl, take that, take that, take that, take that. See tonight ain't no holding back. Baby girl, that's a matter of fact. Oh,
You want to party, yeah? You never went upset till you party, yeah, yeah, yeah. And everybody, yeah, girl, roll your body there. And nobody knows why we choose to drink all day. Nobody cares if they have plenty bills to pay. Cause now is not the time for that. It's not the place for that. Oh, no, no. Then we take a wine to that. Wine for that, yeah. Welcome to the Fetland. Everybody has something in their hand. Call it a big jam. Every woman run down with a man. This is the Fetland, where everybody have a drink in their hand. Some call it a big jam. So what you say?
saying that I want you back, and I can't do without you. You know that I need you, can't live, you sativa. Girl, you got me flying without visa. Ooh, sativa. Mi amor, numero uno diva. Ooh, time after time, you get me, you blow me mind when you tell me goodbye, but you making me cry, girl, you bust up me eye. Time after time, you get me, you blow me mind when you tell me goodbye, but you making me cry, girl, you bust up me eye. Ooh, boy, you making me, ooh, all I wanna was my time on cue. Lay on a melody right next to you. Shoot to the stars on a midnight cruise. Stay at your love like a sunrise view. Don't wanna say I want you bad, but girl, you got me saying that I want you back, and I can't do without you. Ooh, time after time, you get me, you blow me mind when you tell me goodbye, but you making me cry, girl, you bust up me eye. Time after time, you get me, you blow me mind when you tell me goodbye, but you making me cry, girl, you bust up me eye. I never had it easy for the brands and the bling and the expensive thing, oh nah. I never had the money, never had nice living. And mama say, oh, you could have it all, just work hard for yours. I say, mama, you know I'll work hard for sure. Now Jaja blessed me with the opportunity to fly country to country. Now I could drink champagne when I thirsty. Now I could see only thing I never see. They say this hour youth man so loud. But I thank me for the run the family. No bad mind boy they can stop me. On every show I smiling cause trust me, life is so lovely, boy. And I'm far from finished, whoa. And I can't believe it, no. See I'm far from finished, whoa. Love the life that I live in, yeah. I say na 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 na, I say na 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 na, say na 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 na, I say na 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 na, I say na na na, I say na 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 na, I say na na na, I say na 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 na. Forever thankful for doubters in the past and the people who laugh, oh nah. Forever grateful for all the times I've failed. And Papa say, oh son, you can't give up. What's for you is for you. I said, Papa, you know I will never stop, no. Now Jaja blessed me with the opportunity to fly country to country. Now I could drink champagne when I'm thirsty. Now I could see all the thing I never see. They say this hour youth man so lucky. But I thank me for the run the family. Now no bad mind boy they can stop me. And every show I'm smiling cause trust me, love is so lovely, boy. And I'm far from finished, boy. Na 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 na, I say na 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 na, say na watch them watching your things. So you want to show out, they can't talk to me. Guardian angels watch over me. Every morning I kneel down and pray for my family. Look, I say, you want to show out, no bad company could take away what you give to me. When I see negative energy, I go the next way. Now bad mind, I don't know who send you, but tell them you will see me now. You see me now. You see me now. Envious people, I beg you please, when you see me, don't see me now. Don't see me now. Don't see me now. Don't see me now. Well, everybody put your hand in the air. In the air. I said, Jah, have a big plan to it. Rock in the air. Hand in the air. Yeah. Well, everybody put your hand in the air. In the air. I said, Jah, have a big plan to it. Hand in the air. Rock in the air. Yeah.
Girl, if you're ready, let me know. No set a long talking where you for. Wine to the ground, y'all drop to the floor. Oh yo, oh yo. Well, if you're ready, let we go. Start up the countdown, time for the show. If that's where you want, take one for the road. No, but take anything now. Don't take it personal. It's just a one night jam. Don't make it personal. I hope you understand. Don't take it personal. It's just a one night jam. Just get to work, my girl. Don't make it personal. For you, action, thunder. The way you move your body make me wonder. Show me that you wanna take it all the way. Oh yeah, don't play, run that. You know you could get it if you want that. Girl, if you're ready, drop it down for me. So if you're ready, let me know. No set a long talking where you for. Wine to the ground, y'all drop to the floor. Oh yo, oh yo. Well, if you're ready, let we go. Start up the countdown, time for the show. If that's where you want, take one for the road. No, but take anything now. Don't take it personal. It's just a one night jam. Don't make it personal. I hope you understand. Don't take it personal. It's just a one night jam. Just get to work, my girl. Don't make it personal.
You have me singing 911 emergency. 911 emergency. I don't think I could handle all that, baby. Ooh, I don't think you could manage all that, baby. Ooh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Patrice again. Ooh, yeah. Tonight is your night, is your world, baby. Do as you like. Why now you please, babe? Do as you want to be tonight. Have your way with me all night. Carry on, baby. Carry on, baby. Carry on, carry on, carry on. Wind it up, wind it up, wind it up. And when I shake it up, I shake it up, I shake it up. Oh, you like that, yeah. And when you bend it up, you bend it up, you bend it up, you bend it up, I like that, yeah. And when you give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, baby, I like that, yeah. And when you give me all you got and you put it on the spot, I like that. You have me singing 911 emergency. 911 emergency. I don't think I could handle all that, baby. I don't think you could manage all that.
Jump in a style of the rhythm like Angla me, Angla me, Angla me.
but I can be yours sometime. Baby, call me sometime, not all the time. So, girl, you already have a man, but I can be yours. Baby, call me, but not all the time. So, you take a wine with me sometime. You take a grind with me sometime. You can vibe with me sometime, but not all the time. So, you take a wine with me sometime. You take a grind with me sometime. You can vibe with me sometime, but not all the time. So, you call 10 times yesterday, 10 more again today. Think you can program I, but I live my own damn life. Seems like you want more than company. Can't tell in friends and family. Both a young handsome guy. Don't get things twisted, baby. Don't expect no more than what we already have. Keeping it simple. Don't expect no more than what we already have. Keeping it simple, yeah. Girl, you already have a man, but I can be yours sometime. Baby, call me sometime, not all the time. So, girl, you already have a man, but I can be yours. Baby, call me, but not all the time. So, you take a wine with me sometime. You take a wine with me sometime. You can vibe with me sometime, but not all the time.
Just haven't told you. So many things I want to show you. There's only 2 days alone, girl. Whatever. Darling, I need your company. Baby, you're just so good to me. Come love, come make love today. Don't fit this thing, I shall day. So we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go hang up on. Why? So we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go have a good time. So we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go hang up on. Why? So we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go have a good time. Baby, let me wine up, bring my mind up. Pull that thing from me, I know. Baby, I need more time, so a little vibe on her. Oh, Miss Carnival, 2 days with you is never enough, nana. I miss Carnival. Memories of you is filling me up. Please make it stop. Darling, I need your company. Baby, you're just so good to me. Come lover, come make love to me. Don't bring this thing I shall day. Say we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go hang up on. Why? Say we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go have a good time. Say we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go hang up on. Why? Say we go hang up on. That's all, girl, we go have a good.
If it was meant to be, I go find you. I ain't gonna end up behind you.
Charming, they right behind you. Charming, they right behind you.
Come, let me do it today. Let me do it today. And I'm sure to see you tomorrow. Don't tell me about tomorrow. I need it today. I go take it today. I ain't sure to get that tomorrow.
What you could do when you get this ching chong, ching chong,
I don't know, no.
What you could do when bumper fling dong, fling dong.
No.
How you could deal with all this magic. When I make that bumper flick, dip like this.
I mean, no liar. Girl, you make me higher. I go drink champagne over fire. Girl, wine and burn my desires. Oh, no. It's not the usual, so don't get delusional. Cause you never know. So come, let me do it today. And I'm sure to see you tomorrow. Let tomorrow deal with tomorrow. I need it today. I go take it today. I ain't sure to get that tomorrow. Who promised you to Jaja. And I pray to the Father. Me rise every day, and I put in work. Yeah. All you wanna, when you see me on the road, come and show me love. Yeah, you know you're pretty, mama. Girl, I want to see you smile, girl, it don't matter. I man juggle and I juggle and I juggle. When it's too hard, slow down and bubble. Bust a sweet, sweet wine in the face of the struggle. Yeah, yeah. I man say, leave the darkness and your woes. If they threaten, leave them home. You don't have to be alone. Meet me at the carnival road. Hey, these vibes, they love these vibes on the carnival road. Yeah, plenty vibe on the road. Yeah, this love, their vibe, their smile on the carnival road. Yeah, road. Yeah, say colors, we paint in colors, we live in colors. In colors, we wave in colors, we live in plenty vibes. We wearing colors, my people colors, we vibes in colors, we smile in colors, waving colors, belting up, pumps up out of colors. Yeah.
Ready for a war again. Go down that road again. It's all the same. I'm always ready to take a life again. You know I'll ride again. It's all the same. Tell me who's gonna save me from myself when this life is all I know. Tell me who's gonna save me from this hell. Without you, I'm alone. Who gon' pray for me? Take my pain for me. Save my soul for me. 'Cause I'm alone to see. If I gon' die for you, if I gon' kill for you, then I spill this blood for you. Hey.
I fight the world, I fight you, I fight myself, I fight God. Just tell me how many burdens left. I fight pain and hurricanes, today I wept. I'm trying to fight back tears, flood on my doorsteps. Life we live in hell, puddles of blood in the street, shooters on top of the building, government aid ain't relief. Earthquake, the body drop, the ground breaks, the poor one with smoke,
She works the nights by the water. She's gone astray, so far away from her father's daughter. She just wants her life for a baby. All on her own, no one will come. She's got to save him.
Daily struggle.
She tells him, ooh, love, no one's ever gonna hurt you, love. I'm gonna give you all of my love. Nobody matters like you.
Stay up there.
She
Stay up
tells him
there.
your life ain't gonna be nothing like my life. You're gonna grow and have a good life. I'm gonna do what I got to
Stay up there. Stay up
So
there.
rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Somebody's got you, rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Rock-a-bye,
Rockabye, rockabye. Rockabye. Single mom, what you doing out there? Facing the hard life without no fear. Just see and know that you really care. 'Cause any obstacle come, you well prepare. And no, mama, you never shed tear. 'Cause you have to set things year after year. And you give the youth love beyond compare. You find the school fee and the bus fare. Already pops disappear. In a wrong bar, can't find him nowhere. Steadily your workflow, everything you know, so you not stop, no time for your dear.
Now she got a 6-year-old, trying to keep him warm, trying to keep all the gold. When he looks in her eyes, he don't know he is safe when she says, ooh, love, no one's ever gonna hurt you, love. I'm gonna give you all of my love. Nobody matters like you. So rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry. Somebody's got you, rock-a-bye, baby, rock-a-bye. I'm gonna rock you, rock-a-bye, baby, don't you cry.
With a bang, bang, bang. Alright then. Rockabye, rockabye.
on sheep, precise and exact. Good lord, girl, you're going so hard. Girl, you look the best when I'm in the two apart.
Good Lord, why you going so hard? Boy, I'm trying to be good, but you're making me be so bad.
Bang, bang, bang.
Love me like that. Love me like we ain't never let go.
Oh, yo, me.
Love me like that. Poco, poco, muy, muy lento. Time on the way to take, we were in Jamaica, Honduras. Love me like that. Love me, give me some bad love. Love me, give me some bad love. Love me, give me some bad love.
Spin like propeller, you want the in thing. Spin my girl, cause you know how to swing. Jiggle up your body, jiggle up your sing sing. I'm going to never you already sing sing.
I like to have a look hot. I'm the queen, but you know that I never yell.
Are you ready for your night of loving? With the stamina king, hear your body calling. Girl, you're going so hard. Girl, you look the best when I'm in the two apart.
Why you make it so hard? Ain't it good enough for you? You're ready to become my girl. Love me like we ain't never let go. Love me like that. Poco, poco, muy, muy lento. Time on the way to take, we were in Jamaica, Honduras. Love me like that. Love me, give me some bad.
Give me some of that. Thinks with the badness, look how she at. Shape like a dead, but I'm not just that. It's a good piece of mental under the cap. A piece of game, I'm love how you chat. Watching every step of the paper, the way you got. Staying in my brain, memory not detached. Mainly my aim is to give it this love. If not, dig the way you move. Let me acknowledge the way you do. Then I would not lie, baby. You be me up like I did. It's how hypnotic the way you move. It's why I wanted to get to you. And I would not like a baby. You moves how hypnotic.
No lie.
Girl, you never meant to.
Feel your eyes, they all over me. Don't be shy. Take control of me. Get the vibe. It's gonna be lit tonight.
Girl, you never
No
meant.
lie. Hypnotized. Pour another one. It's alright. I know what you want. Get the vibe. It's gonna be lit tonight.
Girl, we never
No
meant. Girl, we never meant. See 'em, so we do it.
No lie.
So we see 'em, do it.
No lie.
See 'em, so we do it.
It's gonna be lit tonight.
With a bang,
No
bang, bang. Yeah. See 'em, so we do it.
No lie.
So we see 'em, do it.
No lie.
See 'em, so we do it.
It's gonna be lit tonight.
With a bang,
No
bang, bang.
lie.
I'm so lit, my girl. So let me say you roll it, my girl. You love it when you win and roll it. Now let me bone it and let me own it, my girl. Give you all the style that I have mastered. I say what baby girl, that's my word. Give you the good loving that is preferred. You deserve it, so don't be scared. It's hypnotic the way you move. Let me acknowledge the way you do. Then I would not lie, baby. You baby, I'm like Roddy. It's how hypnotic the way you move. It's why I wanted to get to you. And I would not like a baby. You moves how hypnotic.
No lie.
Girl, you never meant to.
Feel your eyes, they all over me. Don't be shy. Take control of me. Get the vibe. It's gonna be lit tonight.
Girl, you never
No
meant.
lie. Hypnotized. Pour another one. It's alright. I know what you want. Get the vibe. It's gonna be lit tonight. No lie.
See 'em, so we do it.
No lie.
So we see 'em, do it.
No lie.
See 'em, so we do it.
It's gonna be lit tonight. No lie.
Yeah. See 'em, so we do it.
No lie.
So we see 'em, do it. See 'em, so we do it.
It's gonna be lit tonight. No lie. I like crashing waves, but I wanna see them at first light after a long night. And see the sky take shape, but I wanna see the stars burn after I had my turn. And ooh, you're working so hard. You played your card, so what's the payoff? And ooh, big talk is cheap. You gotta go deeper than deep to get me up. If you're picking up my call, come and do your worst. You know that I'm in control. I'm Wrap your arms around me.
Girl, me don't know why you drift away.
Why you drift away?
The way you put it on me, you make me want to call you every day.
So let me call you.
One touch, one thing that is not enough. Just spark it up. I love you, spark it up. Girl, me what do you want to do?
Lift up the thing if you wanna. Back me back it up, banana. I got time if you wanna.
Girl, how you stay close?
Lift up the thing if you wanna. Body to body you wanna. I got time if you wanna. And everything that you do, girl, I want you stay close to me.
Girl, how you do?
Break your back when you whine like that, move slow for me.
Girl, how you do?
Yeah, stay close to me.
How you stay close to me, there?
And anytime that you need my love, I'ma give it to you. I'ma give it to you. Yeah. I want you hold on to me, girl. Give me the thing when you're whining.
I want you rough up the thing, boy. 'Cause you know me like it.
I want you hold on to me, girl. Because you know how I feel it. Stay close to me.
Stay close to me.
Girl, the things that me love so much. You coulda been me treasure, look how we grown up. It's not nice when I miss you in paradise. So until then I wait for you to show up. Baby, oh you feel so nice and you're full of a life, you know me why. Yeah. Instruction on your door, think twice and your attitude nice, girl, I love you. Push back the bumper and give me that one where you have, 'cause I love you so baby. Your body good, I'm addicted. It's too hard for me to quit this. I'm a junkie for your love, baby. And I'm in so deep that nobody can save me. You are mine. You are my love. You are mine. You are my drug. You are my drug. Yeah, the things that me want so much. You giving me the pleasure when we couple up. See, at night me want kiss you, want cuddle up. So until then I wait for you to show up. Baby, oh you feel so nice and you're full of a life, you know me why. Yeah. Instruction on your door, think twice and your attitude nice, girl, I love you. Push back the bumper and give me that one where you have, 'cause I love you so baby. Your body good, I'm addicted. It's too hard for me to quit this. I'm a junkie for your love, baby. And I'm in so deep that nobody can save me. You are mine. You are my love. You are mine. You are my drug. You are my drug. You are my drug. You are my drug.
Si el ritmo te lleva a mover la cabeza, ya empezamos como es. Mi música no discrimina a nadie, así que vamos a romper.
Con lo mío todos se mueven, la fiesta la llevo en mis genes. Yo soy la reina de los nenes, mi gente no se detiene, aquí nadie se quiere ir. Si el ritmo está en tu cabeza, ahora suéltate y mueve los pies. Me encanta cuando el bajo suena, empezamos a subir de
Y
nivel.
toda mi gente se mueve.
La fiesta la llevo en mis genes, yo soy la reina de los nenes.
Mi música los tiene fuerte bailando y se baila así.
Put your pinky rings up to the moon. Girls, what y'all finest shoes. Don't look too hard, might hurt yourself. Known to give the color red the blues. I'm a dangerous man with some money in my pocket. Keep up. So many pretty girls around me and they're waking up the rocket. Keep up. Why you mad? Fix your face. Ain't my fault they all be jocking. Keep up. Players only. Come on, put your pinky rings up to the moon. Girls, what y'all trying to do? 24 karat magic in the air. Head to toe so clear. Look out. Second verse for the hustlers, gangsters, bad bitches and your ugly old friends. I cannot preach, I cannot preach. I gotta show them how a pimp get it in. First, take your sip, do your dip, spend your money like money ain't shit. Ooh, ooh, we too fresh. Got to blame it on Jesus. Hashtag blessed. They ain't ready for me.
One, two. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could just have your attention, please. For those of you who are sitting in the back, I'm not going to force you to move, but if you so desire, there are a couple empty chairs, empty tables. Of course, we are maintaining 4 chairs per table. For those empty tables and those who want to come up a little closer to this area where all the action is happening, please feel free to do so. Once you spot an empty table and 4 empty chairs. If there's one person sitting on it, well, of course, you're not obliged to move him out, him or her out, of course. We'll be starting in just a moment. We understand that the candidate is on his way, and we'll begin the official part of our function in about 3 minutes' time. So those of you who are desirous of coming up a little closer, please do so now.
Magic in the air.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention, please, and I'm going to request that those standing, if you can take your seat, including the candidate for the United National Congress and the man of the moment is here with us, Mr. Sean Sobers. As is the norm, in this new normal, we will have a safety briefing prepared by the organizers of this beautiful and truly extraordinary establishment. Please look to the screens and you will be guided. So let me go to the...
We would like to sincerely thank you for choosing Achievers Banquet Hall. Before your function begins, we would like to take a few minutes for an important safety briefing. Emergency exits are strategically placed to the north, south, and eastern ends of the building. At every lobby exit, a pull station is positioned, and when deployed, it will alert all occupants that there is an emergency and they must proceed to the nearest exit. In an actual emergency, the elevators are not to be used. Occupants are to proceed in an orderly fashion to any of the exits via the stairway and evacuate to the nearest muster points. The exit points are identified with signage and exist on the east, adjacent to the retaining wall on the roadway, opposite the exit point on road level. The north, at the extreme northeast corner of the front wall. The south, at the extreme southeast corner of the south gate. We would also like to take this opportunity to notify you that the bathrooms are located to the north of the building and the southeastern side of the hall. Both male and female bathrooms are equipped with handicap stalls for your use if necessary. We thank you again for choosing Achievers Banquet Hall and trust that you enjoy your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite our DJ, and I'd like to encourage members of this audience to please sing along and give us that energy of patriotism that is so heavily needed in our country today. So please stand for the playing of the national anthem of our beloved republic.
Forged from the love of liberty in the voice of hope and pride, with boundless faith in our destiny, we solemnly declare. Side by side we stand, all in all the blue Arabian Sea, this our native land. We pledge our lives to thee, ere every queen and bird find an equal place, and may God bless our nation, ere every queen and bird find an equal place, and may God bless our nation.
Please remain standing as I now invite Reverend Kenrick Supnerine.
The words of the Old Testament prophet Amos in Amos chapter 5 verse 24 says, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Let us pray. Dear God, we lift up thanks because you have blessed us with health and strength this day. You have brought us, O God, to this time in our nation and in the world, a time that is testing, a time of trial. It is our prayer that you will give us good judgment. It is our prayer that you will give us the courage to stand for justice and fairness in this world. We pray, O God, that you will bless our gathering here this evening. We pray that you will bless our hosts, especially our candidate Sean, our political leader Kamala. And we pray, O God, that all leaders of this our nation will work for peace and harmony. We pray that here in San Fernando, that there will be continuous work between all religious organizations, so that we work for the common good of this place. We pray, O God, especially for those who are sick and those who are suffering, and we ask that you will help us so that we may help them. So bless our gathering, bless our work, and bless our hearts and our thoughts. Hear this, our humble prayer, O God. Amen.
You may take your seats. Councillor Marcus Girdhari of the San Fernando City Corporation, two former First Citizens in our midst. Firstly, former Mayor Marlene Kudre, former Mayor Mr. Navi Muradali, former President of the Senate, Mr. Timothy Hamill-Smith, President of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce and our host here tonight, Mr. Kiran Singh, and members of the board, Mr. Jai Leeladhar Singh, coordinator of the Confederation of Regional Chambers, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, and of course the man of the moment, the candidate for the United National Congress, Mr. Sean Sobers. Members of the media, I believe, are also here, yes? And of course, members of the business community. Thank you so much for your presence here and acknowledging our invitation on behalf of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce and all the organizers whom I will be naming during the course of this evening's proceedings. We're going to make it as short as possible, because we all want to hear from Mr. Sobers. I am a member of the executive of the board of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce, being led, of course, by the President Kiran Singh. My task is a simple one, to guide you through this evening and to hear from Mr. Sobers, the candidate, and of course, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the political leader of the United National Congress, and the opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar. We will be having some members who will be coming up, of course, to give their well wishes and create an endorsement as well for Mr. Sobers. As you know, the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce just a couple of weeks ago hosted our Attorney General and of course the incumbent Member of Parliament for San Fernando West, Mr. Faris El-Rawi. And this was done at the Skyview Lounge, which is located on the Gulf City Link Road, just about 2 weeks ago. And of course it is all part of the Chamber's thrust, being a chamber for the city of San Fernando, and part of our thrust to recognize those who are now engaged in this, for want of a better word, battle for the government of Trinidad and Tobago in the year 2010. 2020, sorry. Did I say 2010? I wonder if that's divine intervention. I remember the results in 2010, Mr. Hamill-Smith. Yes, 2020, forgive me. In my years of covering elections, which go back to 1988, and of course, during that period in time, I think this election is a most extraordinary one. I think it's been made extraordinary and certainly difficult simply because of the advent of COVID, which has taken 2020 into one of the most extraordinary years for the entire planet, I suppose, since the end of World War II. And for Trinidad and Tobago, of course, there's so much at stake. And for many of us, of course, when we create some level of introspection and when we give guidance to our own thinking, no doubt 2020 will be a year to be remembered. So a lot is going to be said here this evening, and we look forward to hearing from all our speakers. I would like to introduce, of course, my president, my dear friend, and someone I refer to very often as Mr. Bruce Wayne. The reasons why I call him Bruce Wayne, of course, are reasons that I cannot forward on this microphone. But I think that what he has been able to do when we first sat together at my home and we started to talk about the chamber and the responsibility that is so badly needed for the city of San Fernando. We both grew up in San Fernando. I grew up on Rushworth and Gordon Street. And of course, Kieran didn't grow up too far from there, a stone's throw from there. And of course, his family were prominent business people for over 50 years. My contribution during that time, in the early days of spending time with James Lewa, Willie Chen, and so many others, many discussions certainly arose as to the responsibility that San Fernandians have to this great city that certainly raised each and every one of us who have had the opportunity of growing up in this marvelous city. My own personal feeling is that certainly more could have been done for this city that literally took care of Trinidad and Tobago. Kieran is passionate about San Fernando, and he's passionate about Trinidad and Tobago. But his focus for the chamber and the extraordinary achievements and strides that he's been able to make for this chamber is unprecedented, and of course for the city. We've had many organizations, and I've covered many of those organizations before in the world of radio and television, and I have to congratulate him on the strides that he's made in this very young, dynamic, and ever-growing chamber. So I want to invite Mr. Kieran Singh, the president, and of course your host here, to the microphone to address us and of course give us an insight as to this evening's very special presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kieran Singh.
Good afternoon, everyone. After Hansley introduces me, it always brings a smile to my face. He has a way with words that always excites the audience to listen to the next speaker. I'd first of all like to thank everyone for coming at very short notice to attend our second in a series of business meetings with potential candidates to represent us in San Fernando West. As you all know, this is the second in the series. The first one we had was with the Honorable Attorney General a few days ago, where he spoke about his plans for the economic development of San Fernando and how business should be revived and resuscitated. And in that vein, we have invited Mr. Sean Sobers, the UNC candidate, to address us on how he sees the future of San Fernando within the next few years. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no surprise to us that we face very tumultuous economic times. The economy is in trouble. We need expert guidance on how to move and propel the economy forward, especially with respect to San Fernando. Given the fact that Petrotrin was closed down about a year and a half ago, this led to the laying off of several thousand workers. It also caused the downstream industry of the oil and gas sector to be severely affected financially and socially. A lot of equipment has gone idle, and we see no future within the next few days into what is happening with Petrotrin and what will happen to the southern economy. This economy was once hailed from San Fernando as the energy capital. We boasted of that. In fact, the wealth that came into the country to develop this country is from South. But unfortunately, successive governments over the years have neglected San Fernando to the point where we have not benefited from the wealth that we generated. And that was one of the primary reasons that we formed this Chamber of Commerce within the last couple of years, because we realized that the business community lacked a voice. Everything that happened on the national economic landscape that affected us, we weren't given the opportunity to respond or to contribute, whether at the parliamentary level, the business level, through the city council, through regional bodies, we were voiceless. This has changed. This Chamber of Commerce is the premier business organization to represent business interests in San Fernando. You would have seen some forms with a nice pretty pen on the tables. These pens are for you to fill out the forms to join the chamber and join with us so that we can create a greater voice to continue to represent the business interests of San Fernando and how we move forward to generate economic activity within San Fernando and the region within South. What has happened is that after Petrotrin had closed down, we lost several thousand jobs. The youth especially, we think that they need guidance. They say in idle hands are the devil's workshop. And this is very evident when you look at the levels of crime. And there have been no economic activity coming forth from San Fernando in a significant way. The retail sector, especially in the downtown area of San Fernando, faces tremendous challenges. We have had doors closing permanently. We have had staff layoffs. We have had situations where we have to rotate staff just to keep them employed. There's no talk of salary increases because we just cannot afford it as business people. And I want to add, the MSME sector, the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector of this country, is the largest employer of individuals. That is no mistake, that is no secret, we all know it. And with this, we have a bargaining tool, because now we can approach the government and say, listen, we are a chamber, and as part of the Confederation of Regional Business Chambers, we certainly have a strong voice to put to the government, central government, because what happens is apparently when they talk to the business chambers, it is the North business chambers they talk about. They forget that South exists, Central exists, Southwest, Southeast. So where does that put us as a bargaining tool for business people, for entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs who want to start business especially? They didn't have a voice. Now we will change that, and we are changing it. What is happening is, having heard from the Attorney General on his plans to develop San Fernando over the next term if he is successfully re-elected, we now want to hear from Mr. Sean Sobers, the current senator, on what he sees as his future plans for San Fernando if he's elected into the position. As business communities, leaders in our own respect, we want to hear and feel what this gentleman has to say to recognize the business fraternity in South. And we ask that when he speaks, that we hear about some solutions for the economic crisis that we currently face within our southern economy. And we are desperate for solutions. This is an ongoing conversation. We will also be going to target the other candidates who are offering themselves for the election to become the MP for San Fernando West within the next few days leading up to the election date. So we would want to see and hear Mr. Sean Sobers in his deliberations. We also have a couple other guest speakers, economists, prolific leaders in their own rights. I would like to recognize Ms. Marlene Kudre, former minister, former mayor of San Fernando. She did an excellent job in San Fernando. We know her heart is within San Fernando. Dr. Navi Murad Ali, another former mayor, former president of the Senate, Timothy. What we would want to see is the fact that we have people of this stature and several very important, significant business people within the arena here today. It means that we care about San Fernando. We want to see San Fernando develop and grow from where it was into a new city. And that is why we have big clarion call for diversification. We have a member in the chamber who was a former Petrotron worker. He's still in the oil business, although he's no longer working in Petrotron for obvious reasons. I'll give you a story with some irony. He went into a slightly different oil business. He is now manufacturing coconut oil. This is the ironic part. He cannot get enough coconuts to make or generate the coconut oil. And we talk about diversification. We hear this year after year. We have to diversify agriculture, tourism. Well, tourism can no longer exist maybe for the next year or two, but certainly agriculture. And this man is importing coconuts to make this coconut oil. And we have so much arable land in this country. We had coconut estates. They all disappeared. We need to regenerate agricultural activity in this country. Our food import bill is astronomical. At one time, we used to feed ourselves. We didn't have to import any food. Why is it so important for us to have Kellogg's cornflakes? What's the reason? We need to move beyond this and buy local. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a perilous task ahead of us. For our economy to survive, we need to get together, network, lobby the government, lobby the local government authorities to give us the incentives to create and generate business activity so that we could survive. The engine of growth in this country comes from the MSME sector. It doesn't come from anywhere else. The manufacturing sector will claim, their claim to fame is that they generate so much foreign exchange for the country. But how much of that foreign exchange actually comes in and goes back out? And how many of the labor force is employed within the manufacturing sector? And you'll see, the numbers are small. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to say again, please, let's get together to get this southern economy especially working, where we can go forward as a business community and it supports the entire country. There can be no success in a society without positive business activity and investor confidence occurring within our country. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Kiran was last seen diving off in a Batman suit on his building on Cipero Street. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Kiran Singh. And I was just about to say, if the fellow is looking for coconuts, all he has to do is to go around the Queen's Park Savannah and the Coquille roundabout, because it seems to be going there now. That's where it's all concentrated. But it's sad, because I was in Cedrus just about 2 weeks ago, and interestingly enough, I saw a young man sitting down there and having to break the coconuts with his hands, just one fella, and packing it into a bucket. So we've actually gone back to that, because the factory that used to make it down, I think, Suresh, it's in Ikakas, isn't it? It used to be in Ikakas, it's shut down. So I'm hoping that all these things can be restored eventually and in time. As Kiran stated, we have a number of speakers who will be quite brief, of course. But this young man, a very handsome one at that, very distinguished and very respected. He, of course, is an economist, and he's going to address you on the state of the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Valmiki Arjun. I think it's Doctor, isn't it? Dr. Valmiki Arjun. Please put your hands together for him.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to the President, Mr. Kiran Singh, and by extension, the Chamber, for inviting me to speak to such a distinguished audience this evening at this very noteworthy event. Kiran, you said something very, very important, and I just want to reiterate it before I begin my contribution. The micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, the MSME sector, they, in my view as well, have been largely ignored for decades after decades. We tend to pay attention only to the oil and gas sector, the oil and gas economy, not realizing that the MSME sector are the largest employers in the private sector. They employ over 60% of the workers in the private sector. They are the backbone of the economy. They're the small company of today, but they are the large company of tomorrow. They are the future of the economy. So the decisions we take going forward must be hinged on the development of the MSME sector. That is crucial, not just to our economic development, but our very economic survival. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 4 fiscal years, what we've really endured is not a recession. At this point, we have gotten ourselves in the position of an economic depression. A depression is really a circumstance where you have several years consecutively of negative economic growth. So we would have gone from 2016 straight up until 2020, up until this very year as well, of course, with 4 consecutive years of negative economic growth. In fact, if we were to look at the figures between 2015 and 2019, the economy would have declined by 8.7%. Now, understand this figure. In that period, 2015 to 2019, our economy declined by 8.7%. Right? You all should know I have a proclivity for numbers and figures, so a lot of what I say is going to be reflected in this. So this year in particular, especially more so now because of the economic fallout from COVID, we could actually brace ourselves for an economic decline of about negative 10%. So we're going back to 1983 levels. Now, what is the reason for that? We consider ourselves to be an oil and gas-based economy, more so gas-based than oil-based. Now, if you look at the figures, the gas side of our economy, our gas production dropped by 33% from September 2015 to May 2020, 33%. Oil production, sorry, I got it mixed up. Gas production dropped by 18% from September 2015 to May 2020. And oil production is the one that dropped by 33% over that similar period. But that's not the only aspect of our economy. There are many other sectors, especially within the non-energy sector. If we were to take manufacturing, for example, manufacturing contributes about 14% to our national GDP on average. But the manufacturing sector has been underutilized vastly for these last few years. It's been underutilized by somewhere in the vicinity of 34%. So only 66% of our manufacturing sector is utilized. What is the reason for that? A big reason, the cost of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. The cost of doing business is exorbitantly high. We have a tendency in this country, right? What the IMF tends to call pro-cyclical fiscal policy. It's just a fancy word for when we are in an economic recession, when there's a downturn in our GDP, a downturn in our earnings. What we tend to do, we increase the taxation levels and we cut expenditure. Now ask yourselves this. In such a situation, when you know very well that the business community and the citizens are earning less income, does it really make sense to increase the taxation levels at that point in time? No, it really doesn't. What we should be doing is the opposite, a counter-cyclical fiscal policy, where we drop the taxation levels first and foremost. And that is what ought to have been done over these last 4.5 years, over these last 5 years. Instead, we did the exact opposite. And that is one of the core fundamental reasons for the distress of the MSME sector, the distress of the business community, especially the MSME sector. So, an increase in the taxation levels has been one reason, coming back to manufacturing, that the manufacturing sector is seeing significant economic woes, together with, of course, the lack of earnings in foreign exchange. Whether we really want to face up to it or not, we are a very import-intensive economy. A lot of the raw materials, the machinery, the equipment that they utilize on a daily basis are imported, because at this point and in the short to medium term, unfortunately, we don't have the productive capacity, we don't have the production structure to be able to manufacture these items here for use locally. So therefore, we have no choice but to import it. Everything you are wearing right now, the watch on your hand, the medication you take on a daily basis, the vitamins, etc., much of the food that you eat are imported. We have a food import bill of about $6.1 billion on average each year. So when the manufacturing sector is facing these economic difficulties, a large reason for it is because up until now, many of them are still finding it difficult to access foreign exchange. It started to improve somewhat because the Exim Bank is working now very closely with the TTMA, and I want to applaud them for that. So we have now that the economy has declined, as I reiterated, by 8.7% over these last 4.5 fiscal years, and in this year it's going to drop by approximately 10.3% by my calculations. But then we go a step further. We should need to take into account the foreign investment into Trinidad and Tobago. Foreign investment in our country has been in the negative zone for over the last 4.5 years as well. In fact, the latest data from the IMF would show that foreign direct investment in the economy is about negative 751 million US dollars in 2018. That's the most recent figure that we have. And what's the reason for that? It means foreign investors are leaving our economy because it is too difficult to do business in Trinidad and Tobago. You look at the ease of doing business rankings here. We're at 105th position. When back in 2012, we were ranked the highest we've ever been, 62nd position globally. So what happened to all the great reforms that we would have undertaken in 2012 to make doing business much easier back then? Did all the measures we put in place just go to the wayside? Why is it so difficult to do business now in 2020 here in Trinidad and Tobago? This is a primary reason why foreign investors are not finding us as an attractive destination. They're going to other places like Jamaica, for example. Jamaica, an economy that dropped their taxation rate several years ago from 30% to 25%. Now Barbados is following a fairly similar policy when I say fairly similar, they've dropped their taxation rate, but they've dropped it to a whopping 5.5%. So imagine if you all, many businessmen are here in the audience, if you all had a company in Barbados, for the first $1 million you make, you're paying 5.5% of taxes on corporation taxes. 5.5%. That is extraordinarily low. But the authorities in Barbados have recognized that in the case of an economic slump, you need to encourage business. You need to encourage more confidence in the business community. And part of doing that is by attempting to allow them to have more money at their disposal to be able to reinvest into their organization, to expand their organization, to diversify the scale of their operations as well, and also to encourage new businesses to spring up. And that is one key element that the next government in this country has to implement. They have no choice, in my view, but to drop the taxation rate altogether. That is not just going to cause more companies to spring up here in Trinidad and Tobago. It's going to ensure the survival of the existing community, the existing business community here in Trinidad and Tobago as well. It's going to encourage more foreign investors to come in the economy. This, coupled with fixing the other elements in the ease of doing business. In fact, I have a penchant for looking at the issues involved in the ease of doing business, specifically because we have no choice but to diversify the economy at this particular point in time. And in diversifying the economy, first and foremost, you can't just say that, okay, we have $10 billion at our disposal, so therefore we're going to spend it on diversifying into the port activities or in more manufacturing activities or agriculture. First and foremost, you have to set the conditions, the right conditions in the country for diversification.
And Doc, we are just interrupting you for a moment because, ladies and gentlemen, please stand. We'd like to welcome the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, leader of course, the opposition, and leader of the United National Congress, political leader of the United National Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Thank you very much and welcome, Mrs. Bisesa. Dr. Arjun, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Ajoda. So, as I was recently speaking about before we could really achieve diversification here in Trinidad and Tobago, or effective diversification, what the first thing we need to do is set the conditions for diversification here locally. One of the key conditions, of course, as I recently mentioned, is dropping the overall taxation rate in the economy. And you see, yes, as an economist, I can understand that governments are really caught between the devil and the deep blue sea when it comes to earning revenues, especially in times of a recession. But what we have to understand is that governments, they don't just have an economic role, they also have a social role to play as well. If you drop the corporation tax rate, if you drop the overall taxation rates at this particular point in time, then going forward you are giving the business community, especially the SME sector, the MSME sector, the opportunity to have more money at their disposal for reinvestment and for expansion and for diversification of their businesses. And for some of them, for their businesses to survive, especially given the most recent COVID fallout that we are still in the midst of. Make no mistake. That is one of the key avenues for achieving effective diversification here. Does it really make sense that you have a high taxation rate now at this particular point in time? And sure, you would collect your taxes from the business community, but then what you'd be doing is starving them of finances for reinvestment into their operations. So then in the next year or the year after that, several of them will have no choice but to close down. And then where the government going to get their taxes from at that particular point in time? So the answer to me is quite obvious. Right now and going forward, there needs to be a lower taxation level, making it easier, cheaper to do business here in Trinidad and Tobago. I said it before, Barbados recently dropped their corporation tax rate to 5.5% on the first $1 million Barbadian dollars that you would make on profits there in that particular economy. There are other things that we need to do urgently in order to make it easier to do business here in Trinidad and Tobago. We are a very import-intensive economy. Our economy relies heavily on trade. Yet still, in this day and age, it is very difficult to do trade in Trinidad and Tobago. If we look at the port of Port of Spain, for example, much of the infrastructure there has been languishing for quite some time, for decades, as a matter of fact. They've not been, in the last decade, they've not really seen much upgrades in the cranes and the trailers, the various equipments that they have. We've lost a lot of market share because we failed to dredge the port. It's supposed to cost just under $1 billion approximately, when I checked it back 2 years ago, in order to dredge the port of Port of Spain. Now, of course, it's going to be costlier. But our failure to dredge the port in Port of Spain is what cost us market share. The larger Panamax vessels that are coming out of the Panama Canal would have expanded in 2016 to facilitate these very large shipping vessels out of Asia. But they're going into the Latin American and Caribbean region for trading purposes, but they're not stopping or crossing Port of Spain. They're going to the port in Kingston, the ports in Cuba, and also the port in the Dominican Republic. And why is that? Because they upgraded their port infrastructure. They dredged their ports effectively. This is what we didn't do. We failed to do that, and of course, we, having a natural harbor in the port of Port of Spain, could not take advantage of these new opportunities. Now we lost the market share to these other countries. These are, and thereafter making it a bit more difficult to do trade in Trinidad and Tobago, for Trinidad and Tobago to do trade with the rest of the world. There's a lot of extreme bureaucracy when it comes to doing trade as well. Submitting your import and export documents, facing customs as well on a daily basis can be quite problematic, especially when you have to deal not just with the bureaucracy, but the overtime charges as well. I'm sure many of you all here as businessmen could agree with this particular fact. But in countries like Zambia, what is Zambia doing? Zambia has an e-customs platform. So what you do, you submit all your import and export documents online. All your payments are submitted online. Whatever taxes you have to pay as well, you do it online. Can you imagine if we implemented that here in Trinidad and Tobago, what that is going to do for the entire business community? One, you won't have to face any sort of overtime customs charges. And two, you can access your imported items, your items, raw materials, necessary raw materials for the production process, necessary machinery and equipment. You can access it at a much faster pace. If we just implemented these little mechanisms, but important mechanisms, to make it far easier to do business here in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, I know time is of the essence, and I could go on and on about things that we need to do, that we ought to do to fix our economy here in TNT. But now I just want to close on saying this. And as I mentioned, I have a proclivity for numbers. We spent $229 billion in the last 4.5 fiscal years. $229 billion. What do we have to show for it? Did you get value for money? When you go to the hospital, are you getting top-notch medical care? Does everyone in this country has access to clean, potable water? Is there rising poverty and inequity in income going on in the country? These are issues that we really have to consider, we really need to think seriously about. We spent so much money, and by the end of this fiscal year, we're going to likely see a fiscal deficit, a 5-year fiscal deficit, that's in the vicinity of $52 billion. Compare that to a fiscal deficit between 2010 and 2015 that was just over $15 billion. It's a very, very big disparity. Going forward, ladies and gentlemen, there is an urgent need. The biggest issue we have right now here in Trinidad and Tobago is the economy. There's an urgent need for more effective economic management here in our country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Valmiki Arjun, of course, addressing us on the state of the economy. Up next, of course, is the former President of the Senate and one of the framers of the People's Charter, which came out back in 2010. And of course, I'm going to, because our opposition leader is here, and of course, a member of Parliament for Siparia, I'm going to ask some of our speakers who are coming up. And we will be restricting some of those who we've spoken to, and this is, of course, in the interest of time. So let me welcome former President of the Senate, Mr. Timothy Hamill-Smith.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Kamala Prasad Processor, former Prime Minister, and all of the protocols already having been observed, I wish just to thank the Chamber for having invited me to talk to you here this afternoon. And it certainly is a wonderful opportunity to see so many of you here. You know, when I first came, I saw your Better Business Back, but it happens not to be a political party. It's not BBB, but in fact you want to bring back business back to San Fernando the way it was, the way it used to be, and even better, because we should have a trajectory always moving forward. And we've reached, as Valmiki has told you, a very pivotal point in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. If we do not make the right decisions at this point, we are going to either stay in the doldrums where we are now, or worse yet, we will slide over the pit, the endless pit of poverty, of debt, from which there is a very difficult journey to go upwards again. This is our point at which we must decide to change. Change what we've been doing, how we've been doing it, and the way in which we want to project ourselves into the future. So that you ask yourselves, what sort of government will you require in order to achieve that? And I would like to suggest to you that the government we need is a government that can be dynamic, innovative, and creative. Unless we can do that, unless we seek out and achieve a government that can carry us forward, then we really are doomed, given the numbers that Valmiki has shown to you. We need to have a government that understands business and understands how to stimulate business. If we fail to do that, we really, at this pivotal point, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but globally, so we're having this impact not merely because our economy has lost gas and oil as an industry, but we also have a trading difficulty globally around the world that is happening at this time. It is going to take a government with a lot of energy and dynamism in order to take us from where we are to where we want to be. And I want to suggest that you require an institutional framework within which you conduct your activity as you stimulate business. And therefore, one of the pivotal pieces of legislation that underpins those institutions are, of course, procurement legislation. You will recall that was proclaimed in 2015, but in 2020 remains exactly where it was back in 2010. You will recall when the current government came into power that there was an amendment that was sought by the Minister of Finance. Luckily for us, he did not get that amendment through, because otherwise it would have damaged the whole substance of procurement legislation. So I would expect that any new government coming in to power will put procurement legislation at the very top of its agenda. The legislation is there. It has to be implemented. And the other institutional element that we have relates to party financing. And yes, you will see that the PNM government, just in their last throes before this election, introduced legislation to do with party financing. And they modeled it on the Jamaica model, which I would like to suggest is a good model. It could do with some assistance in developing some elements of it, but by and large, the substance of it, I think, is good. And likewise, that is another piece of legislation that I would hope an incoming government would put at the very top of their agenda, because it is that framework. Unless we have, if our institutions crumble, then in fact, democracy diminishes and nothing can be sustained. And the third piece of legislation that I would like to suggest that we require is to introduce fiscal responsibility legislation. And if you look back into the late 80s, early 90s in New Zealand, you will see that New Zealand, in fact, suffered a loss of their natural gas industry, much the same as is happening today. And one of the pieces of legislation they introduced, and it wasn't just a dead piece of statute, it's not just law put on the books with no implications, was fiscal responsibility, where you lay targets as to what you expect your GDP to be, what will be the inflation, what will you hope to anticipate you will achieve relating to raising people out of poverty. And you set for yourselves a target. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have no targets. And so if you don't have a target, then it's just like if you want to make a journey. If you don't know where you're going, any road is going to take you there. All right? Which is exactly what we've been doing, just gaily going around because, you know, we have oil and gas. And San Fernando, as you say, have saved us for many years. But it will not be there into the future. We need a dynamic, innovative government in order to accomplish this, overcome this great challenge that we face. And Valmiki talked to you about the ease of doing business. And I just want to focus there for a moment. He indicated to you that in 2012, we managed to climb and do much better on the ease of doing business. We had the trajectory right. And yet all that has dissipated in the last 5 years. And in the ease of doing business, you know, it's somehow one feels that governments don't understand business. In fact, what we face as businessmen is a block and tackle situation. Have you ever tried to achieve anything in a, you know, that everybody tries to block you, tackle you, and throw you out. Nobody thinks of enhancing the ways in which we can stimulate business, and the next government must do that. So what did we have in terms of the record, and why did we slide? And I can point to you to 3 pieces of legislation that was enacted within the last 5 years that took us backwards. You will recall, in keeping with the rest of the world, we introduced beneficial ownership legislation. And that was right, that we should do so. That was a new thrust. But instead of doing it simply, we decided to do it complex. It is almost as if the motto is, why do simple if you could do complex? And we in the Law Association pointed out that in fact, there were very simple mechanisms adopted in the UK to allow for beneficial ownership without all the complications that this government have sought to introduce. And in doing so, of course, tie up business even further and make it more difficult. I don't know if anybody's had the misfortune of having to fill out these forms, but you need a lawyer, perhaps a string of lawyers, to understand what you have to do in the first place. It is absolutely absurd what was done. And then you have a second piece of legislation. You had a piece of legislation that was introduced, thankfully not proclaimed as yet, and I hope the next government determines not to proclaim it, in which we brought in some land law involving agreements for sale that is going to create a nightmare for anybody who owns land and desires to sell it. It is going to be a nightmare for vendors and for purchasers. With no end in mind, it was just legislation for legislation's sake. That's all it was. It achieved zero. And we in the Law Association pointed out to the Attorney General how simple it would be to achieve the objectives, the mischief that you wanted to overcome. He talked to fraud, and he talked to the question of evasion of stamp duty. And those were simple ways to achieve it without this complex nonsense, absurdity that he introduced. So in fact, what happens, so you were saying that people were selling land over and over and taking deposits. Well, all you had to do was, in Trinidad and Tobago, make it compulsory. You have a stakeholder who holds the money in a financial institution, and the stakeholder could be the bank or lawyers, so it's a confined number of people. And in terms of stamp duty, the Revenue Office has a right to call for your agreement, has a right to get a valuation done, has a right to get the commissioner valuations to look at it. And we go through this complexity, and all it does, and by the way, real property, when you talk about ease of doing business, that carries the most weight of anything else in the assessment of ease of doing business. And if that legislation is proclaimed, we are going to go further down the chain to make the ease of doing business more difficult. You couldn't achieve a worse record for ease of doing business than this legislation occurs. And then, of course, we had one of the most dynamic areas in which Trinidad and Tobago, through its NGO community, volunteer service, and Trinidad benefits from it. And instead, we bring in this registration of NGOs, which is even more absurd than the land law legislation. If any of you had to comply with it, there are dossiers of documents and stupid questions being asked that have no relevance whatever, just for the sake of introducing legislation. And one would almost think for the purpose of making it difficult to do business. So when you come to your decision, as you will come very soon in the next 7 days, I urge you, consider what government, what party will produce for you the kind of dynamic, creative, energetic governance that we require in order to move out of the doldrums in which we find ourselves. So on the one hand, you have those who just stir the pot and nothing emerges. On the other hand, we need to do something different. We need to do something more. We need to do something better if we hope to achieve anything in Trinidad and Tobago, and if we hope to move from where we are, the doldrums in which we find ourselves, into what we are capable of achieving, what we have the potential to do, if we have the right framework, enabled by the right government. And so I leave that in your hands. Your choice is going to be made in about 7 days' time. What government will you choose? Thank you.
Thank you very much, former President of the Senate, Mr. Timothy Hamill-Smith. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to invite to the podium a dynamic young man and, of course, the man of the moment. I had the opportunity of meeting him just a couple of weeks ago. He is, of course, an attorney at law, and he is, of course, your candidate under the United National Congress for the seat San Fernando West. And in the interest of time, and Mr. Alain was also indicating to me that he has a time crunch just before 7 o'clock. So we're going to try to manage things as best as we possibly can. I'd like to welcome Mr. Sean Sobers, candidate for the United National Congress.
President of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Kiran Singh, Political Leader of the United National Congress, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa of Senior Counsel, Chamber members, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Firstly, let me express a heartfelt thank you for the invitation to join your business meeting series and giving me a forum to share my plans for San Fernando West with the business community. I envision San Fernando as a modern, attractive, and safe city hub. I am committed to doing my best to improve this constituency and ensuring that everyone feels included in the process of transformation. For far too long, San Fernando has been left wanting for more. More attention, more infrastructure, more attraction. Having been born, bred, reared, and fed in this city, I wish to categorically indicate from the outset that now is the time for the city to regain its status as the leading driver of national development. Now is the time for San Fernando to return as the crown jewel of innovation and industrial revolution. Now is the time that we change the old saying that there is no life after the lighthouse. but that life truly begins right after that lighthouse. To achieve these bold but realistic ideas, I have 10 key projects that will transform the constituency. The development of these ideas took quite a while. They weren't hatched or reproduced from a magazine overnight. They required constant consultation with the people of San Fernando. After all, these ideas will affect the lives of all Southerners. What better or more meaningful way to do so than with ideas that have been developed from the people themselves, thus demonstrating in its purest form real people-centered representation. I wish to indicate that no one, and I mean no one, will be left behind, that there is something here for everyone, no matter your perceived station in life, that all Southerners will stand to benefit, as these are plans for the people, by the people, and of the people. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what makes transformation real. Kings Wharf transformation. Kings Wharf will be transformed into a city hub where public transportation, commercial activity, and leisure meet. A new city gateway with a common terminal for maxi taxis, buses, and water taxis will allow for an easy flow of transportation in and out of the city. We will attract private investors to build a new city gate and commercial center to develop this area into a recreational zone with exciting nightlife. The transformed Kings Wharf can be our St. James as a liming spot in South and revitalize downtown San Fernando. The new plans for Kings Wharf will also feature a fishing depot with chill zones and a seafood oasis of roast, fry, and other fish options for foodies and outdoor dining overlooking the seafront. Ever mindful of our constituents who call the Kings Wharf home, we will work with them to find a solution for everyone to coexist in a vibrant community. Library Corner revitalization. Library Corner will be upgraded to create a social and learning space, as well as a street bazaar. The development will extend onto Harris Promenade, which will become an adaptive shared space for studying, networking, socializing, and entertainment. There will be an emphasis on providing a space in the heart of the city to continue San Fernando's long tradition of high-quality education. The library building will be refurbished with access to free Wi-Fi computers and learning tools, and will also be a venue for tutoring, classes, and workshops. Everyone, especially our youths, will have access to arts and crafts, music lessons, online classes, and job bank information. Junior Achievement will finally have a southern home, here where youth entrepreneurial talents will be developed and honed. Library Corner will provide a safe space for all San Fernandians to learn and educate themselves. The San Fernando Hill. Capitalizing on the spectacular vantage point from the San Fernando Hill, a large LED lit observation Ferris wheel will capture visitors with breathtaking views of the San Fernando city. The San Fernando Eye will become a shining beacon and a symbol of a revitalized city. The Hill Plateau will become an attractive location for private sector developers, offering a panoramic and serene view of San Fernando. Cafes, bistros, restaurants, play parks, and an event hall will dot the hilltop, making it an idyllic recreational spot. Community developments in San Fernando. To promote and build community spirit, inter-community sports competitions will be promoted. They will be dubbed the Street Jams. Local businesses, we'll call upon them to sponsor teams so they will become more involved in communities that they operate within. San Fernando will be home to the first government-assisted school for special needs children. This is something I'm extremely passionate about as well. This novel initiative will address the needs of communities and will ensure all are taken care of and given a chance at a proper future. Improved security in San Fernando is also something that we carefully looked at. San Fernando will be made a safe city by implementing advanced surveillance technologies. Through the widespread development of sophisticated HD CCTV cameras with analytics and artificial intelligence, a new dedicated network operations center will be able to effectively monitor all communities. Special attention will be placed on monitoring public spaces, especially the new social and recreational spaces, including the Library Corner, Kings Wharf, and the San Fernando Hill, so that all will feel comfortable and safe. Enhancements and improvements to existing municipal police will allow them to better serve and protect the communities as well. Future-focused youth agenda. We recognize that the potential of many youths is not being developed and harnessed. Our agenda includes a special focus on making youths more employable through skills training using the many government agencies, facilities within the constituencies and close environs. Distance learning centers will also be set up in every community center with coordinators who schedule different skills learning programs daily. Young professionals from the community will be hired to run the programs, thus all can feel a part of renewing and building their own community. Youth must have proper access to data services to become competitive in this, our modern world. We'll promote a pilot service to secondary schools to allow students access to high-speed data whilst in school. This will facilitate modern teaching methods, and students will be better able to work and study as information becomes readily available. Environmental initiatives. Maintaining the environment and promoting clean communities and homes will be emphasized through reduce, reuse, and recycle programs. Electric buses and other green initiatives like promoting the use of bicycles will be implemented in the city to improve our air quality. Our Digital Transformation Agency. A new digital transformation agency will be established in San Fernando to utilize the many bright minds of the South and will be the start of diversifying the economy into IT services. This agency will work across all ministries to implement the UNC's Digital by Default strategy for the government. This e-government approach to government will enable delivery of better services, improve the ease of doing businesses, and empower citizens as they will have more and better access to information and services. Many jobs for professionals will be created, especially for our youths with information technology and computer science skills. With your support, San Fernando West will finally be restored as the intellectual, cultural, and industrial capital of the nation. I also wish to take this opportunity to indicate that having walked this constituency since the ending of January, the beginning of February of this year, I have met so many different people from so many walks of life. And the most talked about issue within our constituency are bread and butter issues that affect our constituents on a daily basis. On a daily basis, that in the year 2020, we still have a lot of people within our constituency who are fighting for bread and butter issues. That no politician should ever enter politics to butter their own bread and having to find themselves in precarious positions to recuse themselves on a number of occasions from cabinet meetings. That is not what we swore an oath to do, not to butter our own bread. but to ensure those citizens who require those bread and butter issues, who require assistance from us on a daily basis, that their needs are met and that their bread is at least provided and then buttered for their future. Trinidad and Tobago has really entered a precarious position for quite some time. San Fernando West is totally no different. Work and partner with me. Together, we will ensure that San Fernando has a future. Work and partner with the political leader, Mrs. Kamla Bissard-Bissessar, and she will ensure that Trinidad and Tobago has a bright and sunny future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sean Sobers, the United National Congress candidate for San Fernando West. Please give him a round of applause again. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker needs absolutely no introduction. When she entered politics way back in 1990 and of course served as education minister, the greatest expansion of schools and of course the education sector received its greatest expansion as a minister back then. As the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago between the period 2010 and 2015, we saw the greatest thrust, the largest expansion of both islands, Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, this is not just coming from me, but merely an observation by so many throughout the length and breadth of this country. We saw the addressing of rural neglect, the introduction of the National Spatial Policy, growth poles, widest expansion of the education sector in both primary, secondary, and of course tertiary, and of course TechVoc expansion. And indeed, the issue of rural neglect was for the first time dealt with in a holistic manner, and one where people started to see relief. So I suppose you know exactly who I'm talking about. Let's bring on stage now the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the opposition leader, Member of Parliament for Siparia, Mrs. Kamla Bissard-Bissessar, SC.
Thank you all very much. I want to thank the Chamber and recognize the President, Kiran, and members of the Chamber. And of course, Valmiki, thank you. Nice to see you here and to hear what you had to say, because very much of the things you said are contained in my economic transformation plan. So I think that was a great thing listening to you as a distinguished economist. And Timothy Hammersmith, former President of the Senate, again, listening to you, I thought you were reading from my manifesto, so thank you very much. Former mayors, my good friend and sister, former Minister Marlene, and former Mayor Navi Muradali, thank you all for being here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the time is now. Now is the time, because it's almost dinner time. And you know, in some gatherings, you are asked to speak after dinner, because then people are, you know, more comfortable, they've had their dinner. But when you have to speak before dinner, there's an advantage. You will wait to hear the whole speech, because you know you're going to get something to eat after. But if we feed you first, you may decide you've had enough and decide to leave. So thank you, Chamber, for inviting me to speak before dinner. I will not detain you too long. And what can I say? There's so many things I can say. Val, you talked about the huge fiscal deficit, which accumulated under the present government, took us where we were from 15 billion deficit. And that 15 billion was not all ours. We inherited a deficit as well. And we left it at a 15 billion, and they have taken, what do you say, $52 billion. And the question is, where did that money go? Did you see that money? Where has that money gone? Over 200 and something billion dollars spent in the last 5 years. And there is nothing to show for it. Now, the government has put out an online manifesto, which is in fact 40% made up of pictures. Another 20% is to blame Kamla. And there is no specific plan. I would ask you to go and look at it. But when you do that, I would ask you to take a look at our plan. We put this out since last year, October. So there's no 7-day plan. A government in office for 5 years comes on the eve of the election, a plan, and I'm telling you, whatever percentage of pictures, at 20% of blame camera, so it takes you up to 80%. And the other part of it, they're claiming credits for achievements of the past government. They're claiming the Couva Hospital, Insurance Hospital. Can you believe that? Left it abandoned for 5 years. Today, just before the election, they are saying that they have commissioned the Couva Hospital. And they changed the name, of course. We had it the Couva Children's Hospital. I don't know what they have against children in this country, that government. They changed the name to call it the Couva whatever. But whatever arose by any other name is still arose. And today I take full credit for that hospital in Couva that we constructed. So, talking about the deficit, Van Mickey talked about lowering taxes, lower taxes, the benefits that will come. I have promised on this in my manifesto, my plan, that we will lower taxes, both personal and corporate taxes, in order to get the business sector to grow. So we totally agree that that is a good way to bring our economy back on a better track. You talked about the port. It is something we have been looking at. In fact, just before we left office, we had plans for that port. It is something we could further consider based on what you said. Procurement legislation, Timothy spoke about. We passed that procurement legislation and promised it in the 2010 campaign that within the first 90 days of getting into office, we will take the various drafts of procurement legislation. And at that time, the JCC had a draft piece of legislation. We took all of that, we took the stakeholders. It took us 5 years to get it through the parliament. First, the government refused to sit on the Joint Select Committee. The now government, then in opposition, the Rowley faction in the parliament, they refused to sit on the Joint Select Committee. And then they delayed and they delayed. We finally passed it. We could proclaim parts of it. Mr. Timothy Hammersmith was the chairman of that committee we had put for implementation of the legislation. So he's very aware of the various provisions within that piece of legislation. And it allowed us to appoint, just before we left office, the procurement regulator and the staff there to implement. The government came into office, this government, and up to today, they have failed and or refused to proclaim. I give that commitment today that when we get into office, we will proclaim all of the legislation and implement it. Because you see, you have to understand what proper procurement means, especially for the business sector. What does it mean? Is that they cannot handpick their friends and family. You cannot run down to Australia and buy hostile vessels. You cannot run off and buy aircraft for Caribbean Airlines. You cannot procure construction works. You cannot procure services sector works by VAPs. You will have to go through a proper process. And that is why it is very important, because if there's bad procurement, if there's corrupt procurement, then every dollar that is taken out to give to friends and family is ready to create more poverty that my candidate Sean spoke about. So it is a very, very important piece of institutional framework that Timothy spoke about. Timothy also spoke about fiscal responsibility, and I ask you again, go up uncplan2020.com. And in it, we talk about fiscal responsibility. And these are very important. I didn't plan to do this today, but Timothy has raised it, and I think they're good points. I have not articulated with my voice before, so maybe now it's a good time. We talk about public financing, restoring fiscal sanity. We have here ensure the independent office of the procurement regulator is properly resourced to carry out its vital procurement functions in safeguarding the public purse. Establish procurement units within the line ministries to enhance transparency and accountability and achieve significant cost savings. Restructuring the state enterprises. I know this is a sore point with some employees of these enterprises, but we will gradually divest selected non-strategic state enterprises. Tell me, for example, Why does the government have a state board for fisheries? The seafood board, why? Why should a government be involved in that? So all these non-strategic enterprises, we will divest them. Free up time. Let the private sector do what the private sector does best. Further, we'll transform the remaining state enterprises to publicly owned companies. Put them on the stock market. You can buy shares in them. If they're doing badly, you sell your shares. If they're doing well, they will gain more and more valued, so that they'll work to become more profitable. Ensure publicly owned state enterprises are run efficiently, guess this, by private sector firms. We have to get the private sector involved, more involved in the business of Trinidad and Tobago. Further, we will undertake a debt workout strategy for selected state enterprises. We talk about the fiscal deficit, but you know, it doesn't include the debts of these companies, you know. So $52 billion deficit, fiscal deficit, but it doesn't include all the debts owed by WASA, by TNTEC, by XYPQ, all these government state enterprises. We have to do what is called a debt workout strategy for them. The details are in the plan, but as I say, I will just give you the headlines of some of the things for fiscal sanity and fiscal responsibility. We will have to improve the operational efficiency of WASA and TNTEC. Mentioned today, you go all over the country. I've been going, meeting and greeting, and you don't have water. In 2020, people are suffering for basic need, which is water. So we have to look at their efficiency, WASA and TNTEC as well. We will have to work out for both WASA and TNTEC, same way, debt workout strategy. We have to strengthen the current regulatory framework for public utilities. We must, for greater efficiency. I said before, and I repeat, we will reduce the tax burden. We will remove all these nuisance taxes, the online tax. Why do you do that? We remove the online tax. And we remove that nuisance tax on lotto winnings. Why it is you have to put a tax on lotto winnings? I mean, what's the whole point of having a lotto that somebody, God bless them, and they're lucky, and they win, and you put a tax on it? You know, I made a joke the other day, I actually saw it with my own eyes, that in election time, silly season, you see crazy things. And they're so busy paving roads that they never paved for 5 years, 4.5 years, now 1 week to go, paving, and they're really, truly, actually paving around the cars. Have you seen the pictures? It is real. In their madness and in their haste to fool people, they think they can fool the voters of this country. That's what they're paving around the car. You could see the cars parked, and the paving is here, none there. You know, and that's the same thing. Do not get carried away with the stories. Do not get chained up. I cannot see that a person who is a sitting prime minister of this country will tell their population that the UNC is bribing voters by giving them the old $100 bill. That's reported. You could hear his voice. He said, we are bribing voters. And he was in La Hoqueta Talparo, and he said it up there because he's so afraid of Julia John. She's going to win that seat, I'm sure of it. So they are bribing voters. We are bribing voters with the old $100 bill. Mr. Raleigh, you think people in this country are so dotish and stupid that they don't know what an old $100 bill looks like, that they'll take it for a vote? If there's any bribing of votes, it's not happening for the UNC. You take my word for that. I give you my commitment. There's no bribe. What we are about are plans and policies to get Trinidad to be working again. That's what we're about. And that's what this plan is about. And we've added to this plan. We've added things, given the COVID, what has happened with COVID, we've added some things, I think Valviki may have addressed it, which is the wage subsidy. For the small and medium-sized businesses who have suffered so much during the COVID, We are saying that we have to keep the workers there, and we have to keep these businesses going. Some of you here may well be in that category of small and medium-sized business. So what am I saying? That a UNC government will provide a wage subsidy. That wage subsidy will be 75% of the minimum wage. And that way you can keep your workers and you can keep your business going, and that way together with the private sector, we can get Trinidad and Tobago working again. So how we envisage it is 75% of the minimum wage. I've worked it out. Last meeting I had, I gave the numbers. The numbers are nowhere near. The quantum to make this happen is nowhere near to the $22 billion this government has spent in COVID, and yet people are suffering so much. Businesses are suffering so much. So the wage subsidy is something we've added to this after COVID, post-COVID, well, during COVID and post-COVID. Continue with fiscal sanity and fiscal responsibility. We will repeal the property tax legislation. They just don't understand. In 2010, that was the mantra. No property tax as they envisage it. I listened to Marlene Kudre speak here last Sunday. By the way, this is the second Sunday I'm spending in San Fernando West, thanks to Sean. Marlene spoke about it. She talked about the annual valuation rate, the ARV, annual rateable value of your property, to assess how much tax you would pay on your property. And whereas before it meant the annual rateable value of your property, they've changed it to be annual rental value. So your parents might have built a house which you inherited, or you may have built a house whenever. They're coming to look at that house today, should God forbid that they become the government again. And they're going to look at your house and they're going to say, how much rent if I want to rent that? What is annual rental value? But you're not renting it. You are living in it. You would have built it. Like me, I built my house over 10 years it took us to build our house, piece by piece by piece, to what it is today. And they're going to then drop the tax on you based on your rental value. That is really, really impossible. Timothy, I'm sure you're a lawyer, you understand what's happening here. This should never happen. We will not keep that law on our statute books. We will repeal it. Further, we will scrap the proposed revenue authority. What they were doing with this revenue authority they wanted to create, first of all, it will affect a lot of jobs. Our answer to getting better tax collection is not through a new revenue authority. Their proposal and the law, we have the bill before the Parliament. It's now dissolved, so lapsed, and we will not deal with it at all. Our proposal was to increase the efficiency of the BIR and customs. Their revenue authority was to get rid of all these people, hire people on contract, put a board in place that will be appointed by the Minister of Finance. So again, you're going to put your friends and your family in there. Then your private business becomes an open book for the government. So they want to get at you, they go into your taxes, they go into your returns, and they come for you. They audit you, which they've been doing recently. I'm told quite a few businesses have been going through. When they suspect you are a UNC person, they've been coming to audit you. So we said, no way, that is too political. We will not support it. I mentioned it before, reduce personal income tax. Further, reduce corporation tax. Well, Vicky has spoken about the benefit of that. We will simplify the VAT regime. And again, we will take off the VAT on food items. We did it before, we will do it again. However, we will increase duties on non-essential imports. Our food import bill is over $6 billion a year. That's why I've been pushing agriculture as a main plank in our diversification strategy. We must grow what we eat and eat what we grow. I see Mr. Rowley is now talking about agriculture. When I talked about agriculture moons ago, he said, we don't have land for that. Next thing I see the man planting lettuce. Lettuce are displaying it on a video. But agriculture is the way to go. $6 billion on import duties of things that we can grow here. I know because I do plant and I do grow. I know we can do it here. So we will increase duty. You hear me say we lower taxes on so many things, but we'll increase the taxes on non-essential imports. We will close tax loopholes. Do you know that we lose, so far we've lost over 8 billion in taxes from a tax loophole? And you know what it is? It is a CARICOM countries' bonds. They are tax exempt. So if they are holding bonds and they're making money on those bonds, they are tax exempt. Over $8 billion in taxes to our country has been lost. CARICOM may not be happy with me, but we have to take care. What do you say? Home first. So we cannot continue to sustain these tax loopholes. That's one we will deal with. Further, I mentioned before, strengthen the BIR, the VAT office, and customs and excise. And in all of these, we have targets that we have what we call smart plans. That is, we have fixed targets, which is very important. Timothy had mentioned there must be targets. So in every one of our plans in here, in every sector, we have a target set so we can measure it as to where we are and where we need to be and what we need to do to reach the target. So this is it, my plan, our plan, the UNC plan to get Trinidad and Tobago working again. Before I close, I want to just mention something that disturbed me, and Sean just touched on it. But you see, Sean is such a nice guy. He doesn't like to say harsh things. But sometimes we need to say these things. And he talked about bread and butter issues, yes? He talked about bread and butter matters. That when we become politicians, we take an oath to serve the people, to obey the Constitution and the law. But it should not be that when we get in and sitting at that cabinet table, that there are things that are happening that really not taking care of people, but those matters take care of friends and family. So imagine you have two cabinet ministers, one who is the MP for here, and the other is Minister Stuart Young. In a total, they had to recuse themselves from the cabinet meeting 94 times. The cabinet meets once a week, so there are 52 cabinet meetings per year, and sometimes they don't meet like at Christmas or so. But let's just say 52 weeks, okay? Minister Stuart Young had to leave the cabinet when it was taking decisions on 57 occasions. That is more than a year of cabinet meetings. 57 times he recused himself from decisions that were taking place. And he comes out this morning, you know, I am so, I don't like to say bad words, but it's so appalling. It is so appalling that Minister Young comes out on a Sunday morning to call a press briefing urgently. So people think it's something to do with national security. There's something important, you know, it's for our safety and our security. And he said what he did? He calls an urgent official media, you know, official media conference on a Sunday morning. To do what? To deal with personal family business. And when the media questioned him on more pressing and relevant matters, such as mishandling of the COVID crisis and so on, he said he wasn't there to talk about those things. He came to talk about personal family matters this morning. We are very upset about this, and we have to raise, as a responsible opposition, and the media also has to raise issues about contracts awarded by the cabinet to which family members benefit, the family members of cabinet ministers. And Minister Young talks about this, but he says that the document that the media used and that I spoke about, he says it's a UNC made-up document. This is a response to a Freedom of Information request. The letterhead is from the Office, Cabinet Secretariat, Office of the Prime Minister, Whitehall. This is the document. And in this document, the Cabinet Secretariat informs Freedom of Information request, and they attach two appendices. One has to do with Cabinet notes matters in which Stuart Young recused himself from Cabinet 2016 to 2020, and they list all the matters. They list them. This is not a made-up document. This is from the Cabinet Secretariat Office of the Prime Minister. And Stuart Young left the Cabinet meeting on 57 occasions. Not once or twice. And that 57 meant that there was a personal interest. That's why he recused himself. In law, you recuse yourself where there may be a personal interest, a family matter, 57 times. More than 1 year of cabinet meetings. And the second appendix has to do with the Member of Parliament for San Fernando West, the Minister, the Attorney General, Faris Alwari. He recused himself 37 times. 37 times. Why? Because the decision had to do with something for himself or his family. With Stuart Young, for his family, for his brother, a company in which his brother is the CEO. Now he says he's going to sue me or advise his father to sue me. Bring it on, I have court clues. Bring it on, I have court clues. And I can totally justify what I said. And Stuart Young, stop tapping up the media, they're just doing their job. Again, blame the media, but it is you. You recuse yourself 57 times from the cabinet meetings. The media reports it based on a cabinet secretariat response. Okay? So look, we have what, 8 days to go after today. And Timothy talked to us about the choice. And he told us, you know, either we go this way or we go that way. I will tell you, right now, there is only one choice. There is only one choice. If we want to get this country working again, if we want to get our children a future they deserve, there is only one choice. In San Fernando West, you have a UNC candidate, Sean Sobers, whom we fully endorse and support. A humble gentleman, a person born and bred and lives in San Fernando. This kind of missing absentee MPs and so on. I've tried the best I could to put my MPs, my candidates, where they live. That's very important. Then they're close to you, they know what your problems are, they can service you better. But not just is he a humble person, he's a brilliant young man. He's brilliant, a brilliant attorney at law. So if Faris goes, Faris has lost almost every case he fought, so I mean, we bring it on with Sean, agreed? Let's give Sean a chance. To the San Fernando team, you have done a great job thus far. We have 8 days to go. Let us not score any own goals. Yeah, that's all can happen now. Mr. Rowley issues a statement. We went into the Beatam and Lavantie and Diego Martin on a 1 day gone. The very next day issues a statement telling the UNC, stop having these large gatherings, you know. You know the next day he and Laho get on a truck. 2 music trucks going up behind him. But he wants to stop us from doing what we have to do. I have gone to almost every constituency now, a few more to go, and everywhere I go, the main cry of people, strangely enough, 2 or 3 points. One, they want jobs. They want jobs. The young people are there talking with us, they want jobs. The second thing people are talking about is infrastructure, roads, drainage, water. And that, by the way, is in the top 3 issues of many of the people we have polled as well as met. Basic thing like water I mentioned before. I would have thought that crime would have been number 1 on the list, but that's what has happened. The narrative of Mr. Rowley has been 3 planks or 4. 1, blame Kamala. 2, blame Kamala. 3, blame Kamala. But he has gone on another narrative in addition to the blame game. When he finished blaming me, blame the media, blame everybody, blame the world. So the blame is on COVID now. So his narrative has been, we have handled COVID very well. So you know what? If you put the UNC and Kamala there, they can't handle it. Okay? That's the narrative they're pushing. Some people are buying it. Don't get chained up with that narrative. They've handled it very badly. That is why these cases are now coming up. They handled it very badly. They were not doing the testing. And now that some more testing is taking place, cases are coming. And the more tests you do, more cases will come up. They did not do the testing. He had promised to increase it. They didn't do it. When we compare ourselves with the rest of the world, we are way down. We are 162. Country number 162 when it comes to testing. They have not handled it well. And then the suffering They have not been able to alleviate that suffering. All the grants they promised, salary grant, whatever, rental grant, you name it, food cards, hampers. You walk around, anybody in this room get a salary grant? Anybody here get a salary relief grant? Anybody got a food card? $22 billion later, they have not been able to help the people who are suffering. By now, over 100,000 people have lost their jobs. And let us remember, before COVID, 60,000 had already lost jobs. Before COVID, they had already collapsed the economy. The jobs, people were losing their jobs left, right, and center. Yeah? The deficit was increasing, all of this before COVID. So don't talk about COVID now. So the second narrative is, one is the COVID, the second is about corruption. And when you look at this government, what has been happening, I see them as the most corrupt government that we've ever had in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, ever had. It is just that they are very much smart, and I want to make it very clear. I fired so many ministers because of the perception of corruption. He would not fire them. He would not move them. I give the commitment today, if you're concerned about that, that I will stamp out corruption wherever I can, whenever I can, where I smell it, see it, taste it, I will deal with it. But I cannot lock up people. I am in opposition right now. I am not the police, I'm not the DPP, and that's why I say if you have evidence of wrongdoing, you take it to the police. They are the ones to investigate. Take it to the Integrity Commission. But after 5 years of saying my government was corrupt, they have not been able to charge anyone. 5 years they fall in money, fall in money, fall in money. And the only person who gets charged is Big Mac. Big Mac. She's not a UNC, is she? Not a UNC. So that's just another part of the narrative, the blame game, the corruption issue, and handle COVID well. Look, on Monday, the 10th of August, I urge you to come out, cast your vote for the only choice. Here in San Fernando West, the only choice is Sean Sobers, UNC candidate. Cast your X, put your X next to the rising sun. God bless you all, and I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I thank you.
Incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, whoever forms the next government and of course is the next prime minister will be eating that cabbage and lettuce and tomatoes. By then, I think it will be mature. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa, SC. I think what is absolutely critical, and as the secretary and one of the founders of the Greater San Fernando Chamber, it is important that the next government that comes into power inspires confidence in the people. And I think that, of course, is what's going to dictate indeed, the choices people make. To Mr. Sean Sobers, thank you very much for accepting our invitation here. And I'll be calling on to Mr. Jaili Ladar Singh, who will be giving the vote of thanks. But on behalf of the board of the chamber, to Mrs. Bisesa, and of course to Mr. Sobers, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and it was certainly rousing and indeed magnetic. Thank you so much, and I realized when you moved away from your notes, you certainly spoke from your heart, and that was more than convincing, indeed. Mr. Jaili Ladar Singh, who of course is the coordinator for business chambers throughout the Caribbean region, and of course here in Trinidad and Tobago, will be giving us our vote of thanks before we say goodbye, and of course we invite you to dinner. So just bear with us for another 2 minutes or so.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's just so heartening to see such a wonderful turnout. I want to begin by thanking Andy Balgobin for being a co-sponsor to this event. Could we give him a round of applause, please? I also wish to thank Jim and David for the use of this wonderful hall, the Achievers Banquet Hall. Please give them a round of applause. To Dr. Valmiki Arjun, thank you. Mr. Timothy Hamelsmith, thank you. I also want to thank Mr. Hansley Ajoda for being such a great master of ceremony. Please give him a round of applause. I want to also thank Mr. Kiran Singh, of the President of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce, and thank you very much for hosting this event. Thank you, Kiran. Give him a round of applause, please. So, I also would like to make mention of two distinguished people. First, candidate Sean Sobers. Mr. Sobers, you outlined a very important plan. If I was living in San Fernando West, I would have voted for you, but the best I could do is pray for you. You reminded me of a saying by George Bernard Shaw, some men see things as they are and they ask why, but I dream things that never were and ask why not. Mr. Sean Sobers, the man of the moment, give him a round of applause. Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, Senior Counsel, but also graduated with an MBA distinction from the University of the West Indies, and I would prefer call her a Prime Minister in waiting. Madam, thank you for sharing your vision, your insights, your ideas. We wish you Godspeed. We wish you well. Ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hands together for the next Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Finally, we want to thank the caterers, we want to thank the decorators, we want to thank the sound system professionals and the media for covering this event, and mostly the members of the San Fernando Chamber, members of the business community, and you who have all attended this event, a wonderful audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leela Darasingh, but I think we forgot my friend and colleague, Mr. Ian Allen, for his presence here. Thank you very much, Ian, and of course to your staff and indeed your crew. And again, to Mr. Sobers and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, Senior Counsel, thank you so much for your presence here. And ladies and gentlemen, we have an usher who will be coming forward and will be directing you to the meal stations. Kenny Lucci-Lip, can I see this young lady? I'm told that she's a young lady. Yes, she is. So of course she'll be directing you towards the meal station, which is towards the back of this auditorium. To Mr. DJ, indeed, it's all in your hands now. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary and member of the Board of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce, I'm Hansley Ajoda. Thank you so much to my President, Mr. Kiran Singh, to the Board, Anne Samaru, and of course Mr. Deodat Ramdas. Thank you ever so much for your presence here. And to these two extraordinary people, thank you for gracing us with your presence indeed, and to our speakers. You are extraordinary as always. Thank you, and have a good evening, and have a great dinner. Take care.